what kind of changes would be necessary to make it easier for Taiwan to define itself outside of the China context?
When we review, say, sort of some of these major efforts to diversify Taiwan's trade partnerships or to create new alliances, it's often sort of at this sort of symbolic level where we get politicians together. There's an event on democracy. We all say, you know, rah, rah, democracy, so wonderful, and look at our new friendship with this other country, and then everyone kind of goes home.
Governments probably would always be locked into this symbolic thinking and trend. That's why they are governments. But the society and industry are going in front or ahead of the government in many ways on this note.
What do you think this split government means for Taiwan in the next 4 years?
It means a whole lot of nothing getting done.
Hello and welcome to Connected. I'm Tomasz Koper, sitting in for Divya Gopalan. Every year on October 10th, Taiwan celebrates its National Day. Wait, did I say Taiwan? I mean the Republic of China, which is Taiwan's official name. The day commemorates the 1911 Wuchang Uprising in central China, which was the starting point of a revolution that brought down China's last imperial dynasty and ushered in a new republic. The Republic of China, or Taiwan, is now a liberal democracy, but the weight of its history can be felt even today. So what does this day mean for people living 100 years after the event it commemorates in terms of identity and nationhood? To answer these and other questions, we welcome Professor Chun-Yi from the University of Nottingham, who is also the director of the school's Taiwan Studies program. And joining us from Taipei, we have Professor Nachman from National Taiwan University, a researcher focused on political participation in contested states. Chun-Yi, I want to start with you here. As a Taiwanese person living abroad, how do you celebrate the National Day, if at all?
Hello, Thomas. Yes, this is a very good question. This year, I will be able actually to participate the reception at Taiwan Representative Office in London, not on the very day, but on the 8th of October. So it's a celebration for overseas Taiwanese to celebrate with the representative office. I think I would be really happy to be there.
And Lev, much like me, you are a foreigner living here, but you are also a specialist on Taiwan. So what does this day mean to you?
Yeah, as you rightly pointed out, and this will shock the viewers, I'm not in fact Taiwanese. But as someone who studies Taiwan politics, Double 10 Day is always sort of a great moment in Taiwan each year where the very sort of contested status of what Taiwan is and means to the people who live here really is highlighted. For so many people, it really is a celebration of the Republic of China and the ROC. And for so many other people, it's really more a celebration of Taiwan's democratic development and reflecting on how far Taiwan has come, sort of regardless of any sort of ROC or Republic of China framework.
And Chun-Yi, something I alluded to in the intro is that people often use the terms Republic of China and Taiwan interchangeably, but some people might have a preference for one term or the other. What does that depend on?
Well, I think in a sense that I had an observation in more of in the recent 10 years that Taiwan has been more standing in front than the ROC. And I wouldn't feel like there's more of the Republic of China talk now, but more of the Taiwan. I feel like it's more of the identity thriving of Taiwan's identity. However, of course, that the official country's names still is ROC, but it's from where I am now, it's kind of very rarely to be heard of the ROC.
And Lev, staying with names a little bit, these are not the only names that Taiwan assumes in different situations. When Taiwanese athletes compete in the Olympics, they compete under the name Chinese Taipei. Why is there this sort of confusion? Why do we have so many names for this country?
So the fundamental defining feature in Taiwan, especially when it comes to international politics, is that Taiwan is not a recognized state in international order. It's in fact contested by the People's Republic of China, which is something that everyone in Taiwan is keenly aware of. And part of this contested status that Taiwan has to live with is that it's not allowed to use either its formal name Republic of China or informal name Taiwan in any sort of international event. Instead, it has to use a name that has been accepted by the PRC and international order as sort of a stand-in status for itself. So it goes by Chinese Taipei at the Olympics. And people in Taiwan have very mixed feelings about this name. It's not exactly a point of pride for a lot of people, but of course people will still rally around the name Chinese Taipei during the Olympics for the sake of supporting Taiwan in this country.
And Chun-Yi, going back to the holiday itself, it is also sometimes called the Double 10 Day because it's on October 10th, which omits the word national. And in fact, former President Tsai Ing-wen referred to this day as Taiwan National Day, which was very controversial at the time and caused one of the former presidents not to attend that year's celebrations. Why is there so much contention about Taiwan National Day?
It's about Taiwan and the official name of the Republic of China. And it is about whether Taiwan is actually a true consolidation of Taiwan's identity or whether still related even whatsoever remotely with China. And I think that gradually, people and the government, of course, that is more for Taiwan is for Taiwan. So the celebration of this country that is born, what was born on the Double 10 Day, is more important than taking into the name of Republic of China and a national kind of getting into remotely connection with China in that sense. I get that it's a gist that most of the younger generation of the Taiwanese feel like don't want it to be associated with China in that sense.
I would like to show you both something. In early September, the planning committee for this year's National Day, which falls under the KMT-controlled Legislative Yuan, unveiled the logo for this year's celebrations. This design, which proved somewhat controversial online, highlights the Republic of China's national colors. But if we take a look back, it's clear that it's a bit of a departure from the previous 8 years when the DPP was approving the design and the ROC branding was more subtle. If we go even farther back, we see that what the logo looked like when the KMT was in charge. So, Lev, how much do you feel these designs reflect the attitudes of the parties in charge of the approval, or maybe we're reading too much into all this?
I think from just, a very light symbolic perspective, I do think these graphics are kind of an excellent way to highlight how exactly the two major parties in Taiwan sort of see the ROC as fundamental to what it means to celebrate Taiwan. From the KMT's era, we obviously see a much more leaning into traditional blue and red colors, versus during the DPP's era, we see a lot more sort of flexibility and creative interpretation with how we can design a Double 10 Day logo. Even some of those green and purple logos are a real departure from sort of any traditional ROC imagery. And naturally this year, the elephant in the room is that Taiwan is a divided government at the moment, where the president is from the DPP, but the Legislative Yuan is largely controlled by the KMT. And I think this really does a good job of highlighting exactly why it is some people value Double 10 Day a certain way and others don't. In Taiwan, if you're from the KMT, then you probably have a lot of value on celebrating the Republic of China and Double 10 Day as it's sort of traditionally understood to be celebrated. Versus if you're from the DPP, you probably don't have that same value of Double 10 Day in that ROC sense, but instead choose to celebrate it sort of as a way to just recognize Taiwan's sort of political development. And then there's a lot of people in Taiwan who sort of exist in the middle and don't feel strongly really either way, kind of take it or leave it with the ROC framework, but also don't necessarily have sort of any strong feelings one way or the other.
Well, as Lev just mentioned, in the last election, the presidency went to the DPP, while the KMT won the majority in the legislature, so we now have a split government. Chun-Yi, do you think that the politicians will find a way to work together on issues that are important to voters, that are important to the people living here, often issues that are highlighted when people think about their nation around national holidays, things like unaffordable housing, the wage gap, and low birth rates and others?
I don't have a good answer for that, but I do wish so, because it is important for two parties to work together. And it has to be seen that in any democracies that they are, of course, diversified and also divided society, but to the important issues, two parties have to work together. I want to see Taiwan as a one identity, not a divided society. Maybe this is a too big a hope, but if one can make a wish on a national day, that has been always my wish.
Well, Lev, you're a political commentator, so what do you think this split government means for Taiwan in the next 4 years?
It means a whole lot of nothing getting done, at least if we're going to reflect on sort of what's happened in Taiwan since the president and the legislative yuan have come into power. It doesn't look very positive for Taiwan, at the very least in the short term. So far, since these new politicians have come into power, we've seen a lot of very public fighting between the two parties. I think everyone who follows Taiwanese politics remembers the mass protests that happened earlier this year called the Bluebird movement that were directly protesting sort of this infighting in the legislative yuan over a very controversial bill. And that was sort of the first taste of what I think we're going to get for the next few years. Looking forward in the short term, both the DPP and the KMT, I think, are going to be trying to wage recalls against each other's politicians. And I think that's only going to make Taiwan civil society feel even more divided. And because there's not an election until 2026 during the next local elections, there's really not a lot of incentive for politicians to play ball.
In this situation, I'm sure a lot of people will be listening very closely to President Lai's speech at the event. We're recording this episode before the actual celebrations. But Lev, what do you expect to hear? Is there anything that you're expecting to hear in his speech at the event?
I don't know that there's anything I expect in particular, other than I expect that he may try to match the level of advocating for Taiwan that Tsai did during her double 10-day speeches. I know there's concern, at least in the United States and from other political commentators around the world, about whether or not William Lai is going to get even more controversial in his double 10-day speech and perhaps say some particular lines that are often deemed unacceptable for a Taiwanese president to say, that are overly provocative, and that might happen. And even though I'm sure there will be a lot of commentary on the contents of William Lai's speech, I do think it's important for everyone to keep in mind that presidential speeches are not policy, and that William Lai cannot unilaterally change any sort of status quo on his own. Even though these speeches are meaningful, I think we're going to have a lot of people sort of overinterpreting William Lai's words.
Chun-Yi, I want to go back to something that you've mentioned already, which is Taiwanese identity. There are a lot of conversations happening around Taiwanese identity, or identities, I should say, which are still arguably taking shape. And these things come to the fore more than usual around national holidays. How do you think this shaping Taiwanese identities are playing out in Taiwanese society and politics right now?
I do think that we should jump out from this China-Taiwan dichotomy, because Taiwan, as we talk and as we see, has been a multicultural society or country. And I think that when we consider Taiwanese identity, we shouldn't just consider from ethnicity's perspective. Actually, there are many later-comer migrants are coming to Taiwan. They compose a society, a country of Taiwan. It is a global Taiwan we are forming. And I really do wish that not only us, but also all the viewers, readers, audience can see Taiwan as a global society within the country. And that is important. So this is why I think that if we jump out from this China-Taiwan identity debate, we can see a wider and broader Taiwanese identity in all possible forms.
Well, Lev, you work a lot with young people, with university students. How much does all that, the issues of identity, matter to them on a daily basis?
So as Taiwan has democratized more and more people grow up in Taiwan living as just an everyday democracy. A lot of the sort of historical memory and the historical baggage of democratization is remembered less and less as time goes on, which means for so many young people, living in Taiwan as a free democracy, as a Taiwanese person, is just normal and natural, and not something that they spend nearly as much time thinking about as, say, previous generations. Which is to say that young people still overwhelmingly identify as exclusively Taiwanese, not Chinese. I don't think there's many young people who see themselves identifying only as Chinese, although there are certainly many people who identify as both. Instead, what we see today is a much more sort of default association with Taiwan, whether or not that's ROC Taiwan or just Taiwan. A lot of young people don't sort of have the same sort of dynamic political desire to advocate strongly for a certain direction like we saw 10 years ago, say, during the Sunflower Movement.
Well, have you seen any changes in how people participate in politics here and interact with the state, since that is one of your research focuses?
Yeah, so, there's often this line that, young people are apathetic towards politics. And unfortunately, there's data that often supports that. We know that young people vote the least. That's not a Taiwan problem. That's sort of a democracy everywhere problem, where young people tend not to vote as much as older cohorts. But if there is, a silver lining to be seen from this last presidential election is we did see a lot of youth involvement in politics, and we did see a lot of discourse around young people's political issues. Now, to what degree these discussions on youth political issues are being taken seriously by the other parties, or to what degree did young people really sort of drive the election is sort of separate questions. I think instead what I'd like to focus on in a positive sense is that we didn't see sort of young people just disappear during this last election. Instead, we actually saw young people really come to the front of a lot of political discussion.
Chun-Yi, something that you mentioned earlier is new immigrants and the populations that are now coming to Taiwan to work and make this country their home. But as national days keep happening, we will see fewer and fewer citizens in Taiwan. That's due to the abysmally low birth rates. Yet the country seems reluctant to make more citizens, as it were, as in grant citizenships to the hundreds of thousands of workers, of foreigners who live here. Why do you think that is?
So this is, of course, get into this kind of the security perspective that whether to grant the newcomers citizenship would endanger, especially they focus on whether grant the newcomer, including the Chinese nationals, into Taiwan would endanger Taiwan's security. But the fact is there are many newcomers, not just from China, lived and worked and have family in Taiwan more than 10 years, more than 5 to 10 years, and they are not able to be legally have home in Taiwan. It is, in my personal view, that is what the Taiwanese government should really consider. And I do understand that the security perspective, but it's also a fact that if the global citizens, well, the migrants or immigrants, they come to Taiwan and truly make Taiwan home, will be able to have a legal status in Taiwan to have the citizenship. Isn't that expand of the Taiwan's identity in a different way? This is what I referred to earlier of the global society in Taiwan.
Lev, every time I hear sociologists or demographers talk about Taiwan's very low and stagnating birth rates, they seem very alarmed about this. Yet there isn't a whole lot of political will, at least from my perspective, to change those things. What would it take for Taiwanese politicians to finally tackle the issues of immigration and citizenship and, to put it bluntly, open the doors to foreigners who want to come and settle here?
So for better or for worse, because of Taiwan's complicated political status in the world, we know from decades of political science research that during national elections, the thing that elections become focused on and the thing that is the most salient issue for voters is cross-strait issues, Taiwan's future, and who's going to keep Taiwan safe and sort of steer the ship in a safe direction. That is what people tend to place their vote for president on. Issues like immigration, of all things, is not particularly high on people's mind during national elections when we're deciding who our lawmakers are going to be. And unfortunately, it's very difficult to anticipate that there's going to be a shift in voters thinking about immigration more deeply anytime soon, or an incentive for those running for office to campaign on immigration, especially if immigrants don't have the right to vote. So unfortunately, I think there's this very big structural barrier that sort of stops this from becoming a very salient political issue in Taiwan.
Well, Chun-Yi, young people are often drivers of change on issues like that. Do you feel that the youth of Taiwan, the young people here, are more globalized, are more open, are more willing to sort of open the doors to other people? Do we have to wait for another generation of politicians to get elected, to assume their positions before we're going to see any kind of change in immigration policies?
I'm afraid we have to wait. I don't know for how long. The current situation, it is as we just described, that it's about the security. But it's also, I also hope that the current young generation, that is, again, that's 18 to 25 generation of Taiwanese, will be able to go out from Taiwan a bit more, go to more of the different places to study, to work, and then to see what can Taiwan become to, or what is the difference between Taiwan and other places. From what I observed, that Taiwanese younger generation, student-wise, coming to the UK, maybe it's also because UK is not that attractive, I'm not sure, but not as many as at least 10 years, a decade ago when I was a student. And that is a worrying sign. I have been singing and have been talking a lot about that. No matter what Taiwan will be or can be, I do wish our younger generation will be able to go out and to see a little bit more of the world, and then can take that back to Taiwan to see what they can change for Taiwan. But for your question, the immigration situation, I do think that would have to wait. And I hope the waiting will bring a better result.
Well, Lev, Taiwan has been trying to position itself outside of this China-Taiwan dichotomy and stop being defined through its relationship with China. And that has been accomplished or attempted through different diplomatic, economic, and person-to-person means. Do you think that the authorities are on the right track with those efforts? And if not, what kind of changes would be necessary to make it easier for Taiwan to define itself outside of the China context?
I think there's a lot of well-intended policy attempts that we've seen in Taiwan over the last 8-ish years, ever since Tsai came into office. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the policy approaches tend to value much more sort of symbolic efforts than substantive efforts, where when we review, say, sort of some of these major efforts to diversify Taiwan's trade partnerships or to create new alliances, it's often sort of at this sort of symbolic level where we get politicians together. There's an event on democracy. We all say, rah, rah, democracy, so wonderful, and look at our new friendship with this other country, and then everyone kind of goes home. And that's a good start. Like those are important steps, But I think what Taiwan needs to focus on is sort of being able to deliver more substance to these sort of alliances with other countries. Because if we really want to define Taiwan outside of just cross-strait politics, and we really want to be able to establish robust relations with other countries across the world, it needs to involve more than just symbolic headlines.
And Chun-Yi, the same question to you. What would Taiwan need to do better to better break out of this China context and position itself as its own thing?
I think actually Taiwan has been doing, but not from the governments, from the society and from the industry. Take the example of semiconductor industry. It is not in any way that Taiwanese government can drive, but you could see that Taiwanese companies, well, the TSMC has been invested in different parts of the world. A lot of people were worried about those investments, whether it would be hollow out of Taiwan's core technology. But if you take another perspective, it is a way to link Taiwanese industry in this very core and also advanced making of the chips making industry to link with the world. So I think that Taiwan, if we jump out from the government's perspective, there are many other examples or industries or societies that are doing things with substance. They are connecting with the rest of the part in their field. And this is what I think Taiwan should continue to do. Governments probably would always be locked into this symbolic thinking and trend. That's why they are governments. But the society and industry are going in front or ahead of the government in many ways on this note.
Well, we will unfortunately have to leave it there. Thank you to both my guests, Professor Chun-Yi Lee from University of Nottingham and Professor Lev Nachman from National Taiwan University for being on the program. Today we covered some of the domestic issues surrounding National Day with a sprinkling of international, but for a deeper dive on the international perspective on the event, look out for our next episode coming soon. For now, it's been good to have your company. If you've enjoyed today's episode or have anything you would like to add to the dialogue, join the conversation on our social media. And remember, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay connected.